So then we are back with the more understandings from the Renewed Covenant, from the Aramaic English translation of the Word. This translation comes from the original manuscripts of the prophets of Israel, from the prophets of old, from the prophets of Yahweh, giving us the time of the understanding, of the time of the end. So you can then understand what it means of the time of restoration, where then the nations are then also part of the plan of Yahweh that came from heaven. And when we read it then, the 61st chapter gives us the proper understanding of the time of restoration, where you find then the cities, you find the city, and you find also the Messiah speaking of himself at the first part of the 61st chapter. It's a time of restoration. As we understand, the time of the last 1,000 years of deceit ended in 2009. So then we are during the time of the reduction, plus during the time of restoration. As we understand, when the time of restoration takes place, then war must stop. Wars must be halted, and so far the nations are not understanding what it means, time of restoration. As we understand, there is a time of a transition from the first service and the second service. We then studied the life of the Messiah when he completed the spring feast. This time then the Messiah was showing the many areas of the oracles being explained during his lifetime, so then his people would understand when they would go out practicing the second tabernacle services and then going around the world and forming holy cities. Because the Messiah would be found in the Holy of Holies of each of the holy cities, and then they would give directives to the nations as it was during the time of Yahweh and then on until 1009. So then it started making sense, then the time of restoration, and we also understand that is a transitional time. Every situation where you find then the holy prophecies taking place, you find it in a transitional time. At the moment, we understand wars should, in fact, be halted. However, there is a time of a transition where then his people, the people of Yahweh, they go to work, making sure then whatsoever Yahweh has spoken then takes place. We find these then during the time of Yirmiyahu, the prophets, Daniel. There was a specific time period where then certain people understanding the prophecies would then voice it out, the actuality of the prophecies, so then the people would be engaging themselves in making sure those prophecies then were explained to the people, so then would be completed. You find it in Daniel, you find in sometimes Nehemiah. He also did understand the time of then his people to return and rebuild Jerusalem. He did understand the prophecy, but then the people of Yahweh had to move on. They had to start up the understanding and then explaining what went on and then doing the actual work. So it is truly a time of restoration, and then the people of Yahweh as they were before. They must go out and they must do their part. Understanding the time of the end, the time of restoration, and explaining to the people what it means of them refraining from war. As we have then experienced and read in the news, we understand Israel has joined up with the rebels in Syria. They already started then joining up with the war. However, on a very tiny scale yet they are sending a signal that they are there covering the flanks, so to speak. So there is already a movement of Yahweh's people then enforcing the understanding of the prophecy of the time of restoration. So people are doing their jobs, and must be done more frequently, because then the world is going to be in a position where then in the near future the time of harmony then can come. As we understand, every time there was a completion of a prophecy in the times of Israel, some people had to take the lead and then bring it to its completion, so then later would have harmony. Precisely what was done in the past is coming to our days. The people of Yahweh must understand the scripture, must explain, and then striving for then the completion of those prophecies. As then the events are taking place, we begin to understand the flow of events, and then making sure the lining up of those are in line with the scripture. Then the world at some point in the near future is going to experience a bit of peace, because the Messiah said the time is not yet, and we understand why. So then the Messiah in the 24th chapter gave us lots of indications of what would be in the future, and he was speaking the truth. So Yeshayahu, the 24th chapter from 6th and 7th verses, you can fit Yeshayahu, the 61st chapter, regarding then the restoration of the cities and the city, bringing in then the time of harmony, where there are many ramifications around the world, as per then the understanding also of Revelation, where you find then China being the leader of the trade of the end. So you begin to understand then the multi-layer understanding of each of those factors at the same time. Thus then you understand times and seasons. Please stay tuned, much more coming up.